Thank you. We'd now like to move on to our next session for the evening, the Family Business Panel. We see family businesses run in every industry, and each business has its own story to tell. Traditions and business practices are passed along through generations, and sometimes these family businesses are also professionalized and then stand the test of time. Today with us, we have an illustrious panel of speakers with different perspectives on family businesses and practices. Before we dive into the panel discussion, I'd like to invite one of our panelists, Mr. N. Krishnan, on stage to set the ball rolling for the session. Mr. Krishnan is a family business advisor to multi-generational family businesses across India. He has over 20 years of experience in various industries like infra, IT, consulting, manufacturing, and engineering. He is a visiting faculty at Entrepreneurial Development Institute, Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore, and SPJ IMR Mumbai in the area of family business management and entrepreneurship. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Krishnan on stage.
So good evening to all of you. I don't have any slide deck to present, and all I require is your attention. What I wanted to share with all of you, especially the next generation sitting in this room, the probable successors to the family business. When this session was being organized, a question that was asked is, what would be a relevant topic for the next generation? And what came to my mind, based on my experience from Cochin to Jalandhar, is the process of succession. And I would like to spend the next 10 to 12 minutes, before we get into the panel discussion, on this subject of succession. Now, there are two aspects of succession. One is succession to the business, and another is succession to ownership. A question? Anybody who knows what could be a difference between succession to business and succession to ownership? If you can just pass on the mic to. Anybody who would like to take a dab at it? What would be a difference between succession to business or succession to ownership? See, the teacher in me will not allow me to continue a session without asking a question. That's a problem. Okay, if there are no... Okay, there you go. I would like to hear you, please.
Ownership is just the property or the share. Succession to business is responsibility. So in getting money, you don't have a responsibility, but you have a lot of responsibility.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Otherwise, sometimes if it had gone silent, I would have felt... Okay, the main thing is that when you talk about ownership, you are the custodian of the wealth of the family business, and you are also the preserver of wealth of the family business. That's the fundamental definition of ownership. You are the custodian of the wealth of the family business and also preserving the family business in terms of its wealth. Whereas when you talk about business, it contributes towards the growth of the family, which generates the wealth. Now the question is, what comes first? Do you become a successor to the business first or successor to the ownership? Because a lot of times we confuse in this. At the age of 28, I start having a discussion with my family. I work with a lot of family businesses across the country. The first thing that comes up to their mind is, as the Punjabi says, Auja Sahib is over here. Now, Sada hak, ethe rak. For the Punjabis. Or some people, they start saying that, when is it that? Mera number kab aayega? There is a joke in family business, at the age of 70, which is serious actually. It is on a serious note, it's not a joke. At the age of 70 or 75, the senior generation of the family business says that, how can I retire now? We have just started this project. And at the age of 55, the son is saying, or facing a question from his son, who is around 31, 32, Dad, when will I get the opportunity to take my decision? And the 55-year-old father, 56-year-old father says, don't worry, son. When I get it, you will also get it. I'm also waiting in the queue. Right now, what happens in this context, please try to understand that succession process starts with a mindset. There are 3 mindsets in which succession takes place. Succession with the mindset of right. I have been born in the Pi family, because of which I should get this right. I'm taking the liberty because he's my co-panelist. Sooner or later, it has to come to me. Right? The mindset that, the day I join the business, what designation will I have? In one of the family businesses that I work down north, the entire fight is about what is the designation with which we will enter into the family business. Is it vice president, president? What size of the cabin we will have? Right? It is a question of identity with which I enter into the family business. The second category is more to do with succession with a mindset of responsibility, not right. When I say succession with a mindset of responsibility, what does that mean? My previous generation has sacrificed, they have contributed and created an institution, and I have the responsibility of carrying this institution further, which means that I may have to make certain sacrifices. In one of the family businesses, the children have been sent abroad for education. Spain, Scotland, and they came back after getting educated. And their business is traditional business. They are in the manufacturing of tarpaulin. They are in the manufacturing of tiles in Morbi. And when they come into and see the environment around, they have been exposed to the best of education in Spain. So, good old days in Sylvania Lakshman, there was a tagline, Sare ghar ko badal dalunga. So they come with that mindset that I want to change everything in business. The senior generation says, wait. Transformation I want to make. One of the questions I heard, I want to make transformation. He says, after a lot of hard work we have brought, by the process of your transformation, I don't want to burn out my business. So there is a conflict between 2 generations. What you need to understand is that the previous generation has created an institution through their own thinking, through their own hard work, and we need to align with that thinking before we take any steps of transformation. So there is a sense of responsibility and respect for what has been created, and in concurrence to that, I align with the previous generation to move forward. So that's a mindset in which succession takes place in the second step. The third step is a mindset of privilege. So right, responsibility, and the third is the mindset of privilege. When you do succession with a mindset of privilege, you first of all express gratitude that you are born in an entrepreneurial family. Look at those people who are trying to struggle and making a success out of entrepreneurship. Everybody talks about unicorn, everybody talks about great valuation of business, but there are thousands of people who have ventured into entrepreneurial activities, and you know where they have landed up. And you are one of those who in a 400-meter race have got an advantage of clear-cut 100 meters because you have been born in an entrepreneurial family. First of all, express gratitude for that. That's a privilege. And do not take it for granted. Once you get that mindset of gratitude and privilege, then what happens is that then you don't look at the business from an ownership perspective. You are the custodian of the institution that has been created by your previous generation. I repeat once again, you are the custodian of the business that has been created by the previous generation. So one generation has created, it has been handed over to you. You are supposed to add value and pass on to the next generation. So you, typically speaking, are not the owners. I was just seeing the presentation of Jack Plywood, and I saw the first photograph from where it all started, and then there were a series. Very inspirational. I think every day they must be expressing their gratitude to their previous generation to where they are. Otherwise, they won't be. Today, the gentleman comes over here and speaks. It's an expression of gratitude. It's an expression of, the services that has been done by the previous generation that has made that person come over here and speak about it. Right? Now, these three mindsets are driven by certain fundamental things, which is very, very important in the current context. Number one, professionalization of your family business. What do you think would be the first step when we talk about professionalization of family business? Anybody who would take a dab? When we speak about professionalization of family business, what would be the first step? New technology. New initiative. This question is more for the next generation. The next generation often comes and tells, we want to professionalize. I work with various family business. The younger generation comes. We need to professionalize. The father controls the business so much. Even 50,000 rupees check goes to him. We want to ensure that we get professionals and they work for us and, we get the best out of it. But what's the first step of professionalization? Sorry? Teamwork. Decentralize. Bhari bharkam shabd hai ye sab. Sorry? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You yourself has to become a professional to attract professionalism. I hire a person, chief of marketing, comes to the organization, 3 brothers at the top. In the appointment letter, it has been sent that, this person will report to one Mr. X amongst the 3 brothers. Y and Z will also start questioning this person. Why so? I am also an owner. I have the right to ask questions. He is answerable to me. He says that, boss, who all am I answerable to? So I just gave that as an example. The main thing is to professionalize your organization. You have to become a professional to attract the best talent. Which is followed by the various things, the decision-making power, the RACI matrix, how are you going to operate, the board structure, the business council, so on and so forth, it comes in. But the first and foremost thing is, have you developed the skill sets of being a professional so that you can create a professional atmosphere? That's the first step, okay? The second thing that I wanted to talk about is governance. What type of governance do you have in your family business? Is it that as the owner of the family business, I have the right to overrule, veto, take decisions, or is it that I also follow the same structure that other professionals in the family business follow? There is a process called RACI, or a delegation of authority or delegation of power, how decisions will be taken place. How decisions will be taken in the family business, so that everybody understands the manner in which decisions will be taken. There is no favoritism, or there is no that the owner has a greater privilege than the others. Or amongst the owners, there is a differentiated way of looking at decision making. That becomes a root cause of conflicts. When you talk about managing conflicts in family business, one of the root causes, the non-uniformity that you have in terms of decision making. Especially if it's an earlier generation, you have that alpha male, sometimes called as Karta, who tends to take the decision, and then nobody challenges that Karta primarily because he still controls it. Right? But from a next generation perspective, please try to understand that when you professionalize yourself, when you start taking decisions in a structured way or bring those processes through which you are able to do, professionals in your organization also starts respecting you and they collaborate. in a much effective way because they don't treat you as owners. Another thing, please try to understand, all the wisdom to run the business doesn't lie with the family members. There are smarter people who are available in the market who might be better off in doing certain roles than the family business, the members of the family business, and one needs to understand this. Now, sometimes people get threatened that if a smarter person comes into the business, he will start controlling things. Nobody takes away ownership from you. It remains with you only. You are the smarter guy if you are able to get and recognize that there are people smarter than you who needs to work for you. And you play the role of the owner. That's where the differentiation happens. It's not about how much you control. It's about how much you want to. So the last point after which we can start the panel discussion, the last point that I wanted to make over here is succession is an event. Transition is the process. When you are doing succession planning, especially the next generation, try to look at the transition journey from where you are and where you want to be and what type of skill sets you want to imbibe in yourself to be an able successor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. Joining Mr. Krishnan today on the Family Business Panel is Mr. Ravindra Pai, Managing Director, Century Real Estate Holdings Private Limited. As a second-generation leader, Mr. Pai has been instrumental in Century's foray into an integrated real estate developer and solutions provider from being a pure-play land aggregator. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Pai on stage. Joining these two gentlemen as the moderator for this panel this evening is Mr. Janardhan Rao, partner in the Mergers and Acquisitions practice of Price Waterhouse & Co. LLP. He has over 16 years of professional experience in restructuring, amalgamations, demergers, valuation, capital reduction, repatriation, and advisory assignments. Mr. Janardhan's core focus area include transaction structuring and REIT. He also holds key expertise in family succession planning and advising family offices. Please join me in welcoming him on stage.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan, for that insightful thoughts. So just to take one of the mindset point which you mentioned, right? So you talked about the mindset. There are three types of mindset which the next gen should inculcate. What is, in your experience, when you, in the length and breadth of the country, what should be the focus that the next generation, particularly in India, should focus on in changing their mindset before they're coming into the family business?
I think while the question that you asked is targeted towards the next generation, I think certain amount of responsibility lies with the senior generation as to how they inculcate that mindset in the next generation during their formative stage. What happens is that a lot of times the senior generation tends to make them feel that it is their legitimate right to be part of the business. And obviously it comes into the frame of mind of right. But during the upbringing, during the formative stage of that next generation, if the senior generation invests in making them understand that the ownership rights doesn't come in a platter, first you have to succeed into the business, or success, I'm talking, this succeed is more in terms of succession to the business, contribute, economically value add, and make yourself worthy of becoming an owner, then the culture is predefined. What is it? It's like, you can't grow cotton in red soil. The culture is equivalent to the soil. I have to create the black soil to grow cotton. So if you want to develop a mindset of right or responsibility or privilege, ensure that you develop the culture, and the development of the culture lies with the senior generation, and the next generation adopts that.
Interesting that you put the ball from the next generation to the previous generation. Mr. Ravindra Pai, to question to you then, when you transitioned, as we were part of a professional organization before you joined your family business, what was the mindset change that you had to undergo to, before you transition to the business, and what are the if I can call it, what are the cold responses that you got practically on the ground, and how did you navigate those challenges?
Thanks for having me here. Up until this point, I was under the illusion that I'm a youth working in Kadai. So, being now asked this question about sharing my journey, I'm kind of reminded that I spent 18 years now in this sector. Of course, a lot of seniors out here who we constantly learn from. But if I have to quickly sort of just share my journey, if somebody can pick up something from that. Like I mentioned, 18 years back, I was a freshly minted MBA from IIM Bangalore with a chip on my shoulder. Joined Oracle to head the sales for the South and West, and then joined the family business. When I joined the family business, I was pretty clear that, I was going to join the business because it was a large platform. We were obviously blessed, as Mr. Krishnan said. I think, whatever the drawbacks, I think we were definitely blessed to have a great platform to begin with. And it was a no-brainer that I would join the family business. But when I joined the family business, it was a bit of a culture shock. At this point of time, it may sound funny, but our offices were still operating with dot matrix printers. And our visiting card, we had a fax number. But that's the way the business was done. And when I joined the business, obviously I'd come with a certain amount of exposure to the corporate world. And two things sort of really stuck with me from my experience, The first was that you need to invest in good people. Eventually, I think this is said again and again, but any amount of emphasis is not enough, because I think that an organization is made by its people. And why I say this is that when I joined Oracle from IIM Bangalore, I think I was getting a salary of about 10 lakhs, which was a fairly handsome sum back then. I'm talking about 2002. And my target for the entire year was 4 crores. Not a very large sort of a number, but for 4 crores, I was getting paid a 10 lakh salary. And when I joined real estate, each apartment would be 30 lakhs maybe back then, and the sales guys were getting paid maybe, 15, 20,000 rupees salary. So the point that stuck to my mind was that here was a company who was coming to the IIM, hiring somebody, paying a fancy salary, and great lifestyle. They would fly me wherever I wanted. I was staying at the 5-star hotels. Sort of a no question asked expense account. But here in the real estate, and it was across companies. It wasn't, any particular company, but across. The approach was more as if we were selling insurance. It was not that we were selling, the single largest investment that anybody would ever make in their lifetime. So for me, the first big point that stuck with me was that invest in people. And the second part to this was that once you invest in people, you need to really sort of respect them and take care of them. As a sales guy, I would see other people from my batch who had joined various companies, and many of these were good names. Obviously, from campus you get into good sort of companies, and we would see, how other companies were also taking care of some of them and not taking care of some of them also. And mind you, everybody doesn't always just work for the money. I think it's important for people that you are respected in your setup, you're empowered, you're allowed to take decisions, your voice is heard. So these were some of the things that I sort of took away from my experience from the corporate world, coming into this sort of a space. From a business perspective, at that point of time, like I mentioned, our business was extremely unstructured. Obviously, I think my dad and my uncle were enterprising enough that they didn't need an organization. They just needed a phone, and they would get deals done. Or maybe that was the way business was done then. But what I quickly did was, really did a SWOT of the company as well as the environment, to understand what were the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths were fairly obvious to me. We had a great land bank, deep enough understanding of the industry. And this, I think, really stood us in good stead when the whole boom happened, post the press note too, when everybody went crazy buying land at exorbitant prices. And now I think it's there for everyone to see what has happened, right? So I think the experience of the first generation people, the sort of wisdom, if I can say so, stood us in good stead, didn't allow us to make those mistakes. I mean, I'm sure none of you will remember, but in 2005 to 2008, I think it was the most sort of exuberant time in real estate back then. Money was just chasing Indian real estate. People on Excel sheets were becoming developers. So it was a very, very exuberant sort of a time. So it was important that the wisdom of the first generation also was with us to say, look, this is not how it happens. It's not on Excel sheets that 100 acres, it gets extrapolated. I've done one acre development and suddenly I can extrapolate it on Excel to a 100 acre development, and here I discount it back and suddenly it is I don't know, some 50 crores. So I think the wisdom stood me in good stead. But at the same time, there were a lot of opportunities or threats. I mean, we were almost like a B2B business. The brand was not visible. Uzma spoke about brand building, and I completely endorse her view that, at that point of time, I think we spent 25 lakh rupees in just setting our logo, But somebody told me that, look, in your lifetime, you're going to spend so much money advertising, that 25 lakhs is going to be nothing. And it is true, I think today our advertising budgets, run into a few crores. So that 25 lakhs just seems a good investment. It's not something which, I don't want to look at it and say, oh my God, and I'm ashamed of this logo. So these are opportunities in terms of brand building, team building, identifying good people. So I think the journey in that sense has been extremely good and kind to me.
That's a good example of, the older generation handholding the next generation taking through them, cultivating the soil, as you mentioned. Professor, you mentioned that over the governance structure, you briefly touched upon it, right? Now, India has its own unique challenges, and our sector also has its own challenges on the ground. In the length and breadth of the country, when you speak to different families, how do they go about setting up those governance structures on the ground?
So, my experience has been, that generally in most of the family business, and this is sector agnostic, the tendency is to jump into the ownership structure first. But typically in family business, there are three parts: family, business, and ownership. And there are overlaps between the three. But the tendency for most of the families is to start with the ownership structure first. Formation of trust and formation of holding company, roll it up, shareholder agreement, whatnot. I mean, you guys know better than me. But what they miss out sometimes is that in the family business, there is a family-ness to the family business. And if you miss out on that, the business can look pretty complicated. So that is why the family council plays equal importance as much as the ownership council. And in between what comes is the business council. And the business council is nothing but which fulfills the aspiration of the family members to create wealth in terms of ownership. So, there is a concept called parallel planning process, which is very prevalent, where on one side you have the aspirations of the family members, right? And you have the other side, the business, which becomes the, as we call it, the contributor and fulfiller of the family's aspiration. And from there what emerges is the complete ownership at the top, which is structured between the family and business. And once you start creating the wealth, that by itself becomes an entity. So from a governance perspective, at a very rudimentary level, to answer to your question, the fundamental question we need to ask is, do you have a way to run your family, to run your business, and to run your ownership? And one of the terms we use is run your business like a family and run your family like a business. Then, it gels well and the ownership emerges beautifully.
So the ownership is a derivative, not a root of the entire family. An interesting way to put it. Mr. Avipai, when you started your journey, in your 18-year journey, right, when you talked about professionalizing the setup, building the team and all, how did you marry the entire governance aspect of it in terms of in building the entire organization?
Well, I don't have a technical answer like Mr. Krishnan to this,
So we know practical thing on the ground, how it works.
Well, I think from my perspective, it was important to understand the aspirations of various stakeholders. Because I think different people at different stages of their life or different people come with different aspirations. I mean, it could be my dad who's at a stage in his life where he's thinking, it's a different story that my dad still wants to go buying land and I had to hold him back. But I'm saying many people at different stages of their life have different aspirations. My cousin may think that, oh, why go so aggressive? let's take it easy. His appetite for risk may be lower as compared to mine. So I think, one, it was important to understand that what each one's aspiration in the organization was. The second aspect was that to really make each one understand what their responsibilities were. I mean, end of the day, the buck had to stop at them. It can't be that eventually I have a sense of entitlement but no sense of responsibility. Eventually it can't come and everything can't go land up at somebody else's table. So if I take up something, I need to ensure that this is done. So that was the other aspect, from putting responsibility, onto people. And I think the best way to get all of this done is to really just talk it out. I mean, there's a saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. Initially, I mean, in the youth and much younger, you want to make a difference. You feel, you're a lot more aggressive. I think your appetite for risk is larger. But what I've learned is that it's important to sort of have a very collaborative discussion, an open discussion, hear all the views. Because many a times you'll hear views which you would have not thought of. I think multiple minds are definitely better than any one single thought. But I think also it's important that this does not create some sort of a paralysis, analysis till paralysis. And I think it also has to be clear within the organization that who the decision maker is. And whether you agree or disagree after the discussion, I mean, after you've heard all the points, I think people have to respect that decision and then work towards that decision. It cannot be that, look, I mean, I don't agree with the decision, so I'm not going to abide by the decision. I think everybody has a voice on the table. Everybody needs to be heard. But eventually, it's understood that the decision rests with one individual. And everyone has to work towards that decision. So I think the governance automatically sort of fell in place with these sort of, things put out there.
So the broad principles led to the governance structure automatically fall in place. You talked about the aspiration of different people, right? So the aspirations of the professional management and the family members often tend to be at different loggerheads. How do you manage such conflict resolutions? I mean, have you come across such scenarios when in your organization when it was the growth phase?
No, I think it's not just management versus professional. Within management, I think there is conflict. Within professionals, there are conflicts. I think conflicts are part of human. I mean, you put two people in a room, there's politics, they say, So I think conflict is natural. I think it is how you approach conflict. For us, one of the things that we don't encourage in an organization is politics. I mean, if, in early days, what we would find is that people would come, and this could be professionals, it could be even, family members. They would come and complain about somebody to you. And initially, I mean, I would sort of really be the agony aunt, listen to their problem and, sort of give them an assurance saying, oh, look, I mean, we're going to maybe solve this problem and make an attempt to solve the problem. What I learned then is that this is just nothing but upward delegation. These fellows would just come and put the problem on you because they would feel, oh, now it's off my desk. And in many times in the guise of process, people would send a mail and feel that, my job is done. I have sent the minutes of the meeting or I have documented this, my mail is gone, and many times they would sit next to each other, and we would be like, why are you not just talking to each other? You'd be sitting next in 2 cubicles apart, but they would send the minutes of the meeting to the next guy. So it was sort of ridiculous. So what I have learned is that if anybody has a problem, I call the other person and, into my room and say, now tell me the problem in front of the guy, because this is nothing personal. We are not, I don't think we are running an organization to make friends. That's very, very clear. If I want to go out for a drink or meet somebody, I have my own set of friends which, sort of I socialize with. We're coming to the work to get work done. And we all, when we say professional, we all have to take it in the right spirit. So if anybody would come with any issue, what I would do is just call the other person and, say, now tell me your problem. And many a times, trust me, the problem would get solved. The other guy would be like, no, it's actually not that big an issue. I will solve it when confronted. Yeah. So I think it was very important to have that open culture where people then knew that, look, I can't take some problem to him and go because I know what he's going to do next. So I think that was the way at least I looked at conflict resolution, where I would just bring people together and say, now talk it out if you have a problem, so that's it.
So the open culture helps, resolve between family, business and the family members and the professional management.
I think it works in all situations. Like I mentioned, it's just two people. Why management, why professional, right? Conflict can happen there's a conflict in husband and wife also. Conflict is a natural phenomenon. But I think it's very important that you just talk it out, and it's important to talk face to face. In one of the organizations that I'm part of, they have something called a sidebar. I think it's a word where, you can't talk about a third person who's not in the room. If three of us, we need to discuss something, we can't talk about Mr. Krishnan when he's not there. We can, of course, talk about him when, when we are together. but we can't talk about the individuals who's not there. And the second aspect, I mean, learning from that organization has been that never to pass judgment on people. I mean, never say, hey, I mean, you're so stupid to have done this. I think that sort of really demotivates people when you start passing judgments on them. I think you can share your experience, like how I came here and I said, look, this is my experience. I'm not saying, I mean, somebody else's experience is right or wrong. Whatever you take out of it is for you. But I think experience sharing and being non-judgmental, I think these are critical aspects to sort of really resolve issues.
So, Mr. Krishnan, last question to you. Like Mr. Pai talked about the open culture, to resolve the issues. Sometimes when we meet our family clients, the one important thing which weighs on many family business minds is that, with management that they're able to talk out issues and close it out. But with family members, they have to take the issues home and they face them at home, right? So that is one big overhang which is always there at the back of their mind. What do you recommend to such families that, how do you create that open culture with them to close such issues?
So, as he just spoke about, communication is a very, very important aspect. If at all there are three things that are important in any family business, it's communication, communication, and communication. Having said that, there are 4 rooms in any family business. The family room, where you discuss the family issues and don't mix it up with the business issues. The business council or the business room, where you talk about the business and don't take it to the dining table. And the third is the ownership room, where you talk about ownership and only the owners of the business should speak about. Now, if the respective issues are not handled in the respective rooms, then 2 more rooms comes into play. It's either the dining room or the bedroom where decisions will be taken. Now, that's the risk that you carry. So, that discipline, again, part of the governance. Have you got the right forum to discuss these issues, where communication is the underlining factor? If that is there, I think quite a few differences and some of the things that you discussed about can be addressed. It's a, I would say, it's a process. It's a behavior that we need to develop over a period of time. It's not a switch on and it happens overnight. It's a culture you need to build in. And once it happens, and then you're going to see the results out of it.
As you say, treat the family as a business and the business as a family. Probably that culture will help. Any questions from the audience?
Somebody behind them. Somebody.
Yeah. Okay, we have one here.
Hi, my name is Jayant. I'm from Kurnool, Andhra Pradesh. I have a question. In India, usually family business and succession are often viewed as negative things. There is some kind of negativity surrounding these two terms because people often think of those as lack of finding success elsewhere. How do we change that?
Sorry, when you say negative, in what context are you saying?
Because when I mention it to my peers or for younger generations as well, they often view it as lack of finding success elsewhere in other fields, or eventually coming into family business.
Okay, so I think to paraphrase this question, if I may, sure. What he's asking is that today, today with the wealth of opportunities available for the next gen members, right? There's a perception among next gen members that if you're coming to the family business means that you could not make it happen somewhere else, or you could not be an entrepreneur in your own venture or something like that. Is that a mindset that you see across the country when you speak to the family businesses?
Not really. Actually, I will just answer the initial part. I think he's the best person to answer that question because he is from the Gemba, as I say. So, see, one of the behaviors that we see and insist family business to develop is the mindset of entrepreneurship. Try to create something and contribute so that it works towards the growth of the family business. It could be in the same line, it could be an adjacency. Okay, it's up to this one. But most of the time, I think, as I have experienced, the family members want the next generation to be part of the family business and contribute. That's what I have seen. Exceptions are always there, depending upon the industry, but most of the time, the next generation is encouraged to be part of the family business. Yes, they say that please work outside the family business for a couple of years, gain some experience and expertise, and bring it to the family business so that you add value. That is something that is said. And you will be able to share.
No, I think they're both right and wrong. If you're really worthless and if you join the family business, I think people see through it. They'll be like, yeah, he obviously didn't succeed anywhere else and he joined the family business. But I don't think just by joining the family business, you're automatically qualified as somebody who is not successful in any other field. I don't agree with that. I think there are enough and more examples of people having joined the family business, taken it to a different level. People overshadowed their, parents. And I mean, not just in real estate, across industries, across sectors, we see this. So I don't think, generalizing this, I don't think would be fair to anybody joining a family business.
Good evening, sir. I'm Sumit Birdia from Raipur. Thank you for the wonderful insight. I have two questions, sir. One being that what I have seen in a family business, generally in India, if I talk about India, we are heavily dependent on the sole breadwinner of the family, and the business itself is solely dependent on the person who is handling the business. But I truly believe that system should work, not the person. So as the company grows, how can you guide us to form a system that works, not the person on whom the business is dependent, so that even if the person passes away, the business should still be running in a sustainable way. That is point number one, sir. Point number two, often in family business, I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur in my business, in my family. You see a rivalry, and that rivalry can be between a father and a son, or a brother and a brother. How do you address this conflict? And as you said, you have to become worthy of, inheriting your family business. So how do you define the word called worthy, and how that system works exactly to, just because I'm a son of someone, I should be the owner of the business is something that mindset has to be changed. So how do you define, as the company grows, how do you define and shift the roles to a more worthy person than just being the son or the daughter of a particular person who was handling the business? So that's my two questions, sir. Thank you.
Okay, let me answer the first question, where you spoke about the karta of the family or the founding generation, the breadwinner, as you said, right? And how do we ensure that systems and process takes over than individual taking? See, there is a business life cycle, right? And there is a very interesting model where we say that as an entrepreneur, you are starting at an infancy stage, it goes to adolescence, and then you go to go-go, and then you go to a prime. These are various stages through which you go. In the initial stages, an entrepreneur, you have the rah-rah effect, you got the market, you got your product. Systems and processes will make you bureaucratic. That's why you want to go ahead and capture the market, systems and process. Then you mature to the next level where you say that, no, I want to expand, I want to grow. And that is the time at which you bring the first glimpse of systems and process. You don't scale straight away. And then when you mature to a particular level, that's when you know that I want to replicate. There needs to be repeatability. I want the system to be process dependent and not person dependent. The call that you need to take is, what stage is your business? And when did you start the transition? That's why I said succession, even in systems and processes. Succession is a transition process. It's not an event. One fine day I want to implement ERP. Doesn't happen. There are 5 processes in that, right? Hire to retire, order to purchase, order to cash, purchase to pay. There are systems. And there is a methodology in which you have been running the business. First you understand whether that has been understood uniformly, and have we graduated to that level where systems and process. So it's a sublime process which you have to go through. It's not an event that day 1 you decide and day 2 it will happen. You have to go through that. That's where professionalization will come in. Answering to your second part, the answer to that is meritocracy. You develop the culture of meritocracy. The question that you need to ask, and I will not answer for you, you have to answer. Are you okay to be reviewed on your KRA and KPI as the member of the family who is running the business by a governing board? Are all the family members ready to be subjected to that? When meritocracy will prevail, then you will see that sense of ownership, accountability, along with responsibility will come in. Very easy to say, difficult to do. So that's the culture which will take you to that level that you were aspiring to be. That how do I handle differences? How do I ensure that meritocracy prevails? How do I ensure that, I am worthy enough to be a able successor. The day meritocracy will prevail, worthiness will follow pursuit.
No, wonderful questions. Yeah, I think the first part, in fact, something which I faced myself when I joined the business. Like I mentioned, the business was a very B2B business. Dad was in land, identifying land. It's a very different skill set. You need some sort of an intuition to see, the price is not yet factored in, or this is the area where the prices are going to go up. It's a very intuition-based business, and we felt when we joined the business that maybe we're not blessed with intuition. So what we did very simply was we sort of pivoted our business to development. We felt that development was a business which was more amenable to a process people, not necessarily so person dependent, So we could put a process and, really create a machine and it works on its own. It was part of the whole SWOT we did. We felt, yes, we are very dependent on one individual, his instinct, his intuition, and we pivoted the business. So that's something that we did, from trying to understand what our individual strengths and weaknesses were. So pivoting was one thing we did. The second question that you asked me is that I think unless there is respect within the family, I don't think it'll work. You can say meritocracy, you can say whatever it is. I disagree. My view is that unless there is fundamental respect, unless we respect each other, if I respect my brother, if I respect my uncle, if I respect my dad, only then the business will work. If there is no respect, I think it is better off to sit across the table today, have a conversation, go your own way. I'm not that old enough to make that sort of a recommendation, but I really believe that, if you don't have the fundamental respect as individuals or as a family member, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, what's the ideal time to plan for a succession, best time to plan for succession, and how to structure it? Some of the business houses use family trusts and other methods. So what's the ideal time to plan for a succession and best way to structure it?
So in our experience, each business has its own life cycle at different stages. So depending on your stage of your business cycle, you do it. But the structure per se is a derivative and not the root cause, as Mr. Professor was saying. You can elaborate more. But a trust structure or any other entity structure you want to put in, that's only a derivative. The fundamentals will still be your family, what is your family ethos, your family businesses, and how do you put the entire governance, council, all those aspects in place. Then what will logically follow will be the entire structure. Professor, any other thoughts on that?
So, your question was what would be the ideal time to start the process? The sooner the better. See, I can tell you I have experience where the founder is still active and the next generation has just entered into the business and they have started writing the constitution. And they have started developing the structure. Not that they have any issues. See, I'll tell my own experience. If I were to take 10 prospective or 10 families with whom I work, 8 of them would have called me or got connected with me because there is an issue. Only 2 would have called me where it was absolutely clean and in anticipation of no problems in the future, or there should not be any problem in the future, they're writing. So the sooner the better. It need not be a complex one, but it's better to have certain governance at the earliest. And again, I repeat, succession is not an event, it's a journey. When children are there at age of 14, 15, 16, people have started grooming them to be able successors today. So there is a process that we need to do. The end state is when they sit on that chair and start taking decision, but the process starts much earlier.
As the Punjabi said, "Gaddi mein kab baithenge."
I was about to blurt out, but then I held myself back.
Good evening. I'm Colonel Ajit Menon from JacGroup. I have served for 41 years in the Army, after which I retired and now I joined this lovely company. Your wonderful session took me back that 41 years when I joined as a second lieutenant from the Indian Military Academy, an infantry battalion. And once you wear those pips on your shoulders, you go out very proud that after hard 18-month training, you have become an officer and you think that you're in the heavens. So after that, we landed up in the battalion. And in the battalion, what they did was, the first thing was that they moved me into a barrack with my Jawans. There were 30 of us in one barrack. And they said, okay, now for 1 month, you're going to be with them. and you're going to learn right from the beginning how a soldier lives. And then we'll see whether you're fit enough to be an officer. So these things didn't mean anything, these PIPs. So that 1 month that I spent, initially they, early morning we had to get up at about 4:30 in the morning because 6 o'clock is the physical training PT. So we had to all get ready. And there are about 6 bathrooms, and all of us have to take a turn, to go there and do our normal routine. And so then I said, fine, I was cursing everybody up the ladder, what is this nonsense? I just landed up here and this is how they treat me. Okay, and so I started living with the men and doing this. Then after that, I graduated into a quartermaster. The quartermaster is a person who, takes care of your food and rations and all these. They made me measure for each soldier how much, tea leaves, 4 grams, 90 grams, 60 grams sugar, 90 grams ghee, and all these things. And they said, okay, now you measure this and start issuing it to the, the canteen where they make the food. So I said, what is all this nonsense? But finally, after 1 month, I learned all these things and went out. And the final realization when I became a commanding officer was that when you think of a particular, when I say that, no, my men should be out at 5 o'clock, it goes back. If he has to be there at 5 o'clock, he has to get up at 3 o'clock and start getting his things done. Where does he get sleep? Where does he this? So you become more practical in your approach, more humane. This is what all these things taught. And when you say that, okay, you carry so much, you eat, you should make so much food, you know that what exactly is this entitlement. And when you speak practically. So coming to, I just was thinking whether this template would help in all these young people when they join an organization, they should work the ropes right from below so that they see right from below in their organization at each level what it experiences so that when they give a decision, the decision is much more wise and much more practical. That was my point.
An interesting perspective. If I can take your 2 minutes from your time. When you said you were initially with Oracle, right? How did those interactions, how did those experiences help you when you finally came to the family businesses? When just to dovetail what Sir was saying.
Like I mentioned, I think having worked in a professional organization, I've got a sense for what employees look for. I think I really didn't. The suggestion is great, but the issue that I find is that once you join the business, you can call yourself a sales executive, but everybody knows ki boss ka beta hai. So I think it's very, very difficult to really be treated differently. I think, and when I say differently, I mean as a regular individual who's sort of learning the ropes. While the suggestion is good, I think that's an issue that when you join, how do we sort of really able to really see? Theoretically it may be nice, but practically will it happen? Is something which is a challenge. But having worked in the professional organization, where you're not son of anybody, you're not a shareholder, anything like that, I think there it gives you a sense in terms of what employees look for. And I talked about it in terms of it's not just the money, it's sometimes how you're empowered, what is that they look for, appreciation, small things it could be. But you get a sense for what is it that people look for. So that is something that has sort of maybe stayed with me in my career.
As you said, so when you learn the ropes, you bring it back to the family businesses.
Yeah. So just want to ask you, what are the signs in a family business that are red signals that the business might not succeed to the next generation? What are the telltale signs?
Sorry, business might not succeed
For a family business, what are the telltale signs that the business, that generation need to be very keen and aware about that business will not succeed to the next generation?
Okay, so if I can paraphrase that question, some of our clients, they come back with this thought that, the next generation is not ready. I want to just sell it off and just give up with the money, right? Because they feel that, they're not ready to step up on the mantle and take their business forward, or they're not ready with to take the family ethos forward. What are the telltale signs that as a founder or as, the patriarch that they should look for to find out if that next generation is capable of taking the steps or not?
Well, I think, maybe speaking from a founder's point of view, I think, you need to if you feel that the next generation doesn't really have the drive, the motivation, to take things forward, maybe that's a sign to say, sometimes maybe the next generation is not interested in the business. Very often what happens is that there is a great family business, but somebody wants to do, like, let's say I want to get into hospitality, or, maybe get into the IT space. So again, comes down to the aspiration angle. I think if aspirations are very divergent, if the founder has a very different aspiration as against the next generation who's coming in, I think gauging aspirations could be a good telltale sign, I would think. Second, I think it's also important that while the second generation does come into the business, it's also important to scan the environment of the business itself. And for everybody, it's important to sort of measure, saying that real estate done in 2005 is very different from the way real estate is done in 2015, and I'm sure that will be very, very different from how it will be done in 2025. So it's also important to sort of scan the environment to get signs, of how the business is moving and whether the next generation has the skill set to sort of address that. So these could be maybe some of the ways to sort of measure and see if the business is, is going to succeed or not going forward.
See, one point that I just wanted to add to what my friend said. See, there is a concept in family business called as family outgrows business. What does that mean? See, when the founding generation starts a business, maybe two brothers or one person, and the business grows to 50 crores, 100 crores, it's big enough for that family member to continue with that business. But in the next generation, when the two brothers have two children and it becomes a 6-member family running a business which has grown to maybe 150 crores only, there isn't enough elbow room for everybody to be accommodated. So the business should grow at the same pace at which the family grows. And that cannot happen after the family members have arrived. So there has to be an anticipation of the future also, and see how strategically you are going to grow the business, adjacency or new businesses, whereby you are welcoming the next generation to come in some shape and form. Otherwise, what happens, you start giving functional responsibility. You will handle finance, you will handle marketing, and that is when the conflict starts arising if there isn't a proper structure. So that could be some signs which you can identify early enough to understand that is the size of the business big enough to accommodate the future generation, or is it that we need to look at it differently? This could be one more to what my friend just shared. Yeah.
Good evening. Actually, a very interesting panel discussion. I just wanted to ask you, you see a lot of youngsters who come in, they want to make that impact, and you were mentioning that. So how do you actually have a good balance between the old and new? Because what worked 10 years back may not work now. So like the entrepreneur mindset of the person who founded the business, things were different, like what Ravi mentioned. So how do you kind of draw a balance between the two? Because business is constantly changing. So if you can elaborate a little bit more, I know you touched upon that, but if you can elaborate a little bit more on that, please.
Okay, so see, here is what it is. Typically, there has to be an interaction point between the senior generation and the emerging generation. And the sooner this interaction starts, it is better. In a lot of family businesses, what we have seen is that the senior generation's interaction with the emerging generation starts pretty late. So what happens, their thoughts and ideas when it comes to implementation, either it is heard and not given due attention, or it is not heard because there is no forum. Now what happens, the emerging generation tends to feel that I am not yet ready, I am not yet ready. And it is either interpreted as a capability issue or your time will come. Okay? Now this leads to a bit of frustration also in the emerging generation. So one of the solutions that we have seen in family businesses, if you are able to create a next generation council where the emerging generation is able to sit together along with the senior generation and discuss their aspiration, and the senior generation sees how can we bake in those thought process, part of the strategic thinking or the future, then they see a value in what they are bringing onto the table, and things starts moving forward. That forum has to be created. Again, I go back to that communication.
So one other thing what we see with our families, right, I mean, that some of our clients, the young generation sometimes runs out of patience. You know, like one example which Professor gave of the Morbi, you know, that the kids study in Spain, come to India, and they just want to transform their factory in Morbi. For all you know, there will be a third generation business doing just manufacturing the tiles. So actually one of our clients, what I really picked it up and I really liked it, was he said that when the next generation was coming in, he just gave them time to learn the business, and then he gave them a free hand to start something else on its own. And that dovetails beautifully to the other point which Professor said, that as the family grows, so should the business. So he let the next generation take the business ahead, grow the business, so it automatically accommodates a larger family as well. So while there's no standard answer, you know, each business and family will have to find their own way. But these are some of the interesting things which we pick up on the ground.
Thank you.
An extension to what we were just discussing, a lot of, I take this example because I read a little about it. I don't know whether it will be relevant in India specifically, because I think family business is a very unique topic, and in each country it's very differently handled. So there are these Japanese companies which are generations and generations, and they're not very large organizations, but still it's within the company, it's within the family, and it's run very, very professionally. And there's a very strong culture that runs through the generations. So is that, this is in connection to when you said the family grows and so should the business grow, because it hasn't happened in those kind of organizations. Are they very unique examples, or can they be connected to family businesses in India?